Cool. So this is the third installment of the ZEXE sessions for the study club. We had the first two, which were very in-depth, where Youssef went through all of his notes and shared a lot with us about the construction. And today's session is supposed to be more of like a, not wrap up, but like we're going to look at applications of it, and we're going to try to pool any like open questions that we had around the paper. Yeah, so welcome everybody. I think it'll be a little bit different, so we're not going to do quite as like structured. But I guess the first question out is just sort of like, does anyone, actually maybe I can ask, is anyone open to sort of describing the DEXE example, this like ZEXE on DEXEs and how that's special?
I could have a go. I just read it. Yeah.
Cool.
But we're going to start with that as opposed to the simple ERC20 example.
I don't know. It's up to you. I mean, if you want to.
Yeah, the ERC20 example needs to come first.
Okay, so let's do that one.
So the basic idea is we want to restrict the birth predicate. So transactions have to consume some records, produce others, have to follow the death predicates of the thing they consume and the birth predicates of the things they create. So if we want to create a token, then we want the birth predicate to say that this many tokens were destroyed. And then this will mean tokens are conserved. Mm-hmm. But of course, that's a problem because you need to create tokens in the first place. So the ERC20 idea is we have there's two things possible in the birth predicate. You can either mint or conserve. Mm. And mint creates a new ERC20. And it sort of, we consume some record. I'm not quite sure how that works. Or something which basically means that every time we run mint with this ERC20 thing, we generate a different token. Mm-hmm. A full supply of a different token.
Okay. Yeah. But they're going to make it. Are they going to make it invisible whether the transaction is a mint or not?
Well, I think we're going to get to that in a second. I think what you're describing here is the basic ERC20, right?
It's going to be. It should be invisible. Yeah.
Okay.
You can't tell what. So if you consume some other record which doesn't actually do anything except for provide the randomness, mm-hmm. the seed for the ID of the new token, then you can't tell.
Yeah, you could burn. Yeah, you could do a burn of something on chain and then refer to that.
Yeah, so you're destroying some record, and we don't care what's in it. We only look at the serial number, which is going to be unique. The whatever the nonce is, that's going to be unique, and then we use that to mint a fresh supply of an entirely new ERC20 token. Mm-hmm. And once you've got, so the one person who did the mint has all the ERC20 token, and then they can pass it to other people. But now, in order to create this same ERC20 token with this number, you've got to consume exactly the same number. So you can only create something if you can only hand it out if it exists.
Is this what before you sort of started describing two things? There's the birth predicate is mint or conserve. Is that sort of these seem very similar to like the mint and burn or the lock and unlock of like bridges. And I'm wondering if this is related.
Not really. So one thing here is that mint only happens once.
Yeah.
And then we can conserve with the same token, the same token ID.
Okay. So you're saying it's mint, conserve, burn, or like something like that. That there's like a life.
We can mint many times, but every time we mint, we create another different type of token.
Yeah.
And then thereafter, once we've created this token, we can only conserve it.
Oh, I see. So they're actually hiding when you create a new token.
Yeah.
Oh, clever. Okay.
That's also hidden. well, everything's hidden. This is
yeah. At least I was imagining that you could do, since we're saying we're going to do the ERC20 similarities first. I thought that you were able to do birth predicates in either mode, mint or conserve, but you were able to do both, so you could have a growing token count over time if you wanted. I didn't realize.
No, you can't do that. So the key thing is that every time you do mint, it based the idea, the idea which determines what the token is on the record you consume, all of which on the serial numbers of the records that are consumed in the same transaction. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that every time you run mint, you generate a different token ID.
Okay, yeah, and that's part of that record tuple. Okay, yeah, I see that now.
But I presume that I haven't looked how the amount works. I presume the amount is fixed by the sort of contract, by the predicate itself, so that people can verify that what the supply was.
Right. Which actually, I just really enjoyed this idea of using a predicate on the overall token, because I don't see that, at least in any of the smart contracty stuff I've done in Ethereum. There's not, at least calling it a predicate for me is just familiar. So I really like, I really like that familiarity. It's instead of saying, oh yeah, we have the records nano kernel, instead just talking about, as Anna described it, you have a life cycle, right?
Yeah, so I mean, the interesting thing here, so it's kind of like we don't really have smart contracts at all. We have smart tokens, because this is how they do smart execution with the UTXO model. But you can do other things with these mint or conserve ERC20s, like this ZEXE thing. So at the moment, the ERC20 looks to see which things are consumed, but it sort of this looks at the birth predicates of the things that are consumed, and that means that the death predicate can be anything. And I think this is what this ZEXE idea does. It's we keep this mint or conserve creation birth predicate, but we can use the death predicate of records to allow us to trade one token for another.
Yeah, so we're getting
that you can have this token if you give it you can create a token create a record in which you own these tokens, which I have, which you can conserve, as long as you give me some other tokens.
Right. So I'd imagine that if there was, some kind of UI hooked up to this, in the clear, both parties would agree on the death predicates of the tokens that are being swapped.
Well, okay. So the party that wants to do the swapping, they have to create this death predicate, and so in theory they could publish this and anyone could redeem it. I don't know if that happens. I have to actually look at what the detail of this DEX thing is.
Yeah,
but I think the proposal here was that it's possibly it has to be the record has to know who's swapping with whom. In which case we somehow the two traders need to talk.
Right. I guess this was getting into the difference of this intent-based DEX versus an order book-based DEX. So whether the publishing was happening ahead or not, like on an order book, it would be listed exactly what token and what volume for what trading pair, versus an intent-based, they need to figure that out of band, and probably it would be the taker sending something to the maker, but it seems unclear. But in the order book based, the maker would have needed to kind of craft the outline of how it's working, if I remember that
right. And so they sort of specify the properties they want, and then near the end, sort of on page 33, we have this open book DEX where the maker just publishes like what they want and information to contact them, and then the taker replies and they form of communication that then try and get transaction through.
Right.
Where it all goes through a trusted third party,
Right.
who everyone reveals everything to, and these have different privacy things. These two privacy guarantees, they want one of them gets one and one of them gets the other. So with an open book DEX, we have okay, what's trade? What are the things they claim they have here?
I'm looking at it. So
Trade anonymity. So no one knows what the party is, apart from the party themselves. We can get this if we can like anonymously publish that we want to do this, but that does mean that people can see what we said we wanted. Or you can keep it secret apart from the maker what you said you wanted, but then the maker gets to know, the operator gets to know who you are.
Yeah, consequences and trade-offs as per usual.
Zach, what were your thoughts on this guy?
My thoughts, what on DEXes?
Yeah, on this sort of construction that they had put together here.
I think it's absolutely fascinating, and so what we've been doing at ESC is kind of coming at this from a slightly different angle, but just because of what's like we're constrained by massively limited computation on Ethereum and restricted elliptic curves. And one of the things that has been frustrating us is whilst we can guarantee like the confidentiality of values that are being transferred around, and we have like a stealth address protocol to present correct for anonymity. Being able to genuinely hide the transaction graph is quite appealing, and the idea of also hiding the effectively the algorithms that are being run to determine the legitimacy of a transaction is particularly
cool.
It's pretty cool, yeah.
By the way, I don't know if anyone so Alistair's been on previous sessions, Jeff's here, Wolf, but actually I don't know if everyone knows what you work on. So maybe you just want to say that quickly.
Yeah, sure. So I'm here with Awana. Hello.
Hello.
We're part of the Aztec protocol. So Aztec is a privacy solution for Ethereum blockchain. So we use zero-knowledge cryptography to enable the construction of private tokens where the values being transferred are encrypted and can't be looked at. Can't be known by looking at the transaction logs. You have to know the viewing keys of the nodes. And so what we're enabling is kind of the creation of private digital assets with somewhat customizable like transaction logic, transaction semantics. And we're planning on, we're deployed on the testnets. We're planning on production launch in Q3. And we're kind of actively researching within the constraints of the Ethereum blockchain. And ZEXE is.
And you were on the Zero Knowledge podcast recently, and what I learned was that you're not using snarks, you're using a different zero knowledge proof construction. And so I wondered, given that, could you do a very similar thing to this?
Well, I mean, one of the things which is quite interesting is we could use a ZEXE style system where we would have a little bit more agency over the elliptic curves we use, because the inner curve wouldn't need to be have a high to adicity. So some of this stuff is kind of extremely relevant to what we're doing in Aztec, because whilst we're not a snark, we absolutely can interface with ZK snark technologies. And so, for example, something which we're actively exploring is the idea of validating a batch of Aztec proofs inside a snark circuit, because to validate an Aztec proof requires a small number of elliptic curve scalar multiplications and one bilinear pairing check. But that bilinear pairing check, so if you wrap that all in a snark circuit, you could perform the bilinear pairing check external to the snark circuit. It basically means that you could validate a batch of private transactions inside a snark circuit with relatively low computational overheads compared to other alternative ways of doing that, like via Pedersen commitments. And yeah, so that's kind of a bit of a
Well, I'm glad you shared that with us, because I know you, but I don't know if everybody else was aware of like what you're working on. Alistair, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off like that though. Did you want to continue?
Okay, well, yeah. So the detail here with this exchange is, so what's the death predicate look like? We have this exchange or cancel predicate. So there's two things we can do. Someone can, the person you're trying to, the maker publishes this, and then the taker can use the exchange mode of the death predicate to give themselves the tokens that are going to be traded, and give the maker the tokens they wanted. And the exchange predicate checks that this happens, or the maker can cancel by getting the tokens back.
But canceling in this case, in case that's been broadcasted, I mean, canceling really means that whatever token amount is really just sent to a new, I guess, how are they calling it here? Like it's going to a new public key, like it's going to a new address at the ending, right?
Yeah, but so the cancel means that the maker has the right that they can use their something signed with their key to get take the tokens away, which is not how exchange works.
But is this burning? Is this the same as burning?
No, neither exchange nor cancel burns anything.
Okay.
No, it's simply like instead of instead of being able to, so you need to broadcast out that you want to make a trade, and you also need to conserve the total broken. Maybe the exchange rate has changed up or down, doesn't matter. And you, as the person who created the initial offer, as the maker, you say, yeah, I no longer want to do it at what I published. So you need to conserve tokens, but you need to move it to a different address so that it's no longer a valid, it's no longer a valid offer. But it's been publicly offered, so you have to move it to another address you own.
Well, it doesn't need to be public. The maker and taker sort of agree on this, but then if the taker doesn't actually do the exchange, the maker should be able to get the tokens back.
But I mean, when all of this has been done, when all of it's been done out of band, you wouldn't need to cancel. But in this idea that there's somehow a public order book,
you still need to cancel. In particular, like the maker doesn't want to trust the taker, except with their identity, and we want these tokens. We want to either we get the thing we wanted to trade for, or we get our original tokens back. That's what the exchange or cancel thing guarantees.
Right.
So you won't move the tokens forever if the taker doesn't do do their part.
So this is all in the order-based DEX. I guess I'm kind of crossing into intent-based DEX, which is maybe where I'm adding confusion, because then intent-based DEX was simply, as you list the pairings that you're interested in, but there hasn't been any transactions partially created that get shared, right? Because it's supposed to be done out of band. Yeah. So my bad. We could stay in the order-based DEX and yeah.
So I'm not sure if it's a limitation here. So this exchange or cancel thing appears to have the taker's key involved. So only the taker could do the exchange thing. And I'm not sure if you actually needed that, or if you could do an exchange. You could offer a contract which anyone could redeem if you just told them what the details.
I mean, maybe it does need to be with the takers. So the maker is crafting something for the taker. Is that so that the taker can also, it's like maybe it's so there's a little bit of privacy in transferring that, partial transaction, and then the taker.
So I think the issue is that they need to talk anyway. So even if we could do this but generically without the public key, the taker would still need the maker's public key, and the maker doesn't want to publish that.
Right.
Along with their, their intent to trade. Although,
So
maybe you should have a thing where the makers were all public and the takers weren't.
Right. But then the previous trick that we picked up is it's no longer valid when we were delegating transaction signing. were not able to use this this technique again, where we were, not showing, the true public key. We were like we were using this randomizable signature scheme. We're not able to do that here.
That's a good question.
Because what you say is also what I was thinking, that there was maker makes the first moves, but then yeah,
I would imagine that the so how did that work again? So can we sort of like make the taker like this user? He doesn't know.
This is the worker thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so we picked up this trick from before where we had this worker where we're delegating the transaction signing, which is where the most CPU intensive work needs to be done. And we were using, this randomized
untrusted worker. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, in a way, we're in a similar situation here, just like Alistair said, that, the maker doesn't necessarily want to expose his public key quite yet. Like, he wants to expose his intent to trade. So I'm wondering if we could do a similar thing.
Although I wonder, don't they kind of say here that they through their logic, they're preferring not this intent-based one, like you just said?
I mean, I have a feeling.
Or do you feel like they're just like, here's the two options? Because the way I for some reason, I got the sense that this is the
order. They give the two options, and then they give a different two options afterwards.
Yes, they go further detail.
No, it's like the end that there's this closed and open book.
Yeah,
those don't correspond to the
well, they're both order-based dexes, right?
An order at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's maybe less is said about intent-based DEX, because as I understand it, most of the communication needs to happen somewhere else, because you're simply not like creating a partial transaction, let's say, ahead of time. So as the maker, you're not saying, I have 20 of token A and I will trade it for 5 of token B, and then partially creating that transaction for anybody to fulfill. Or even already knowing a taker that says, yes, I will make that. Intent-based is simply saying, I have token A and I want to trade into token B. And then out of band communication, needs to occur. So
the intent-based. It's very simple, yeah.
But going back to your thing about the sort of untrusted worker and this sort of randomizable signatures. What role is the untrusted worker here? Is this sort of like that centralized third party, what you just described as like a third party who's also like paying attention to that? Is that the worker in this case?
We're trying to work out if this is going to work. If the delegated worker works at all, and whether we can hide from the trader, the public key.
So the reason that the untrusted worker came up again is because during that description of setting up, this delegated scheme, we were able to say, all right, there's two addresses that are being used now because it's an untrusted worker. You don't want to have to share like an address at all with them that they could use later to link back to other activity on this, in this particular blockchain, let's say. So what you can do is you're creating, like a one-time address that's stemming from, a real key pair that, owns that record, that is going to sign on that record. And so the question was, could we do the same thing? So it's what we use for the delegated workers. So presumably we might be able to use it here as well, so that the maker and taker don't have this funny game where, whoever moves first is exposing, an address. But I'm entirely unsure, which is why I'm asking.
Yeah, well, they don't say, as far as I can see. So, okay.
So this might be a good question, actually, for the group.
Yeah, I can write that down. Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the DEXes, Alistair?
No, I think that's what I understand about it.
I have some questions regarding the ZEXE and also the ERC20 construction, because in such a private setup, like with the ZEXE, also like with STEC, for instance, from ZEC, I wonder how the price signaling mechanism should work actually. If I don't know the supply strategy, because the ERC contract might be private, and I don't know much of the volatility, what's being traded on DEXs with this ERC20, how should I just have a clue about the pricing of such a token?
The first thing is you should know the supply strategy. So in particular, you need, in order to own this token, you have this birth predicate, and that will tell you what the mint mode of that will tell you what tokens were created. It gives the rules for when we create tokens. So the idea of the mint conserver is at one point we create a load of tokens, and the actual contract itself will tell you how many tokens there were. The birth predicate that you use for the mint or conserve birth predicate that you use in conserve mode for every future transaction has in its code for the mint part how many tokens were created.
So what you're saying is the minting strategy is actually public? Is this true?
Yeah, the minting strategy is entirely, we create 1 million tokens. So every time we run this mint or conserve contract in mint mode, we create 1 million tokens of a new token type. And then that supply is fixed at 1 million. Well, we can always, or lower, thereafter after.
Sorry, I need to get my charger in.
I see. Okay. And what about the demand and supply at the DEXs? Because this is obviously completely private to the outside world. How should I know?
Not necessarily. So with these two types of DEX, and one of them we publish our intent to trade, and that as with orders in public exchanges, that gives you an idea of what the demand is, what people think the exchange rate is.
So yeah. What you're saying is it is public, the amount, what amount I'd like to buy and to what price I'd like to buy. Is this true?
For the right, yeah, so they give several examples of now we find the section again. So they give several designs. So the intent-based DEX, the makers publish their intention to trade. So that just like with the other DEX, they publish it, but of course they can sort of do it pseudonymously. And in the sort of open book example, it's more or less the same. We publish basically the record. Okay, yeah, the order-based DEXs, yeah, we don't need to know the taker's private key, taker's public key in order to do it. So both the open book DEX and the intent-based DEX, it's actually public what people want to trade. Now, in the closed book DEX, where we trust some operator, then only the operator even knows what the orders are.
I see. Okay.
And in that
the
case,
conclusion would be that ZEXEs for DEX is actually not a way to prevent front running. Is this correct? What do you think?
Right. At least this and try to find what they say.
No, I mean, the point is that you don't know which currencies are being transacted. Oh, he means because you've got to add it and advertise. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is why the intent-based DEX is interesting, or why it's still talked about at all, is that it does protect against front running, since there's no public broadcasting done of what will be traded, other than pairings of tokens that makers are interested in. So there's no chance to front run, because the transaction that hits the blockchain is performing some swap of tokens, or
Right,
whatever.
Yeah, the intent breaks is people, the maker and taker, negotiate out of band what the price is.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we never know what it is. Sure.
Yeah,
That actually,
I thought that we would. Yeah, please.
Go ahead. That actually raises another question of like why we use this. So like your idea there that this could potentially prevent front running. Is there other things that this setup? I mean, I guess it's private, but I'm wondering like what are the other reasons why one would want a construction like this?
So there's a funny thing you could do if you, I mean, I'm not sure people are going to be very happy with DEXs where they don't see a market price coming out of it. But if you add that, then that leaves you very open to market manipulation.
So, I mean, and this is this idea that it could prevent market manipulation.
No, I think it would increase it if you add a price. So the point is that
I'm saying this construction though, because here you're saying it doesn't have that.
Yeah, here there's no market manipulation because it doesn't leak any of the information about the prices. But if you did some kind of, I don't know, strategy for trying to, I mean, you could conceivably have it leak the exchange rates in some aggregated way over a bunch of transactions. I can almost see how to do that. Then it would be fairly open to market manipulation, and much worse than one that didn't have the privacy, which is just funny.
But is that true? Because I mean, let's forget about intent based, because mostly we're talking about open book and closed book. So we're not losing the ability for aggregators in the open book DEX, right? Because the information that is revealed is assets and the amounts that were involved. Like I'm just reading directly from the paper on page 33 at this point. So if you wanted to have an overview about what is being traded for what and at what volume, so you're able to see exchange rates moving over time, you don't lose that. However, what you do get is trade anonymity, right? So, and then in a closed book DEX, it's the same world as any other centralized DEX right now, where you're trusting that the rates advertised are correct, and they're going to be exposed by whoever's running that closed book. So we're going back to front running, on an open book DEX. I don't know. I mean, I guess because that the assets are being revealed, that somebody who is, a miner in this blockchain, they could still front run. And in a closed book DEX, the only person who could front run is, an inside operator. So it sounds, at least from a really, from a distance, it sounds almost like the exact same thing that you get now, except in the open book DEX case, you have the anonymity between the maker and the taker. Nobody learns about their public address. In other blockchains right now that would have something like this, like kind of you get to create tokens on top of this blockchain. Usually addresses that are signing and sending transactions are owning or have approval of tokens. And so there's a little bit of metadata leaking about the fact that this address held tokens and just did something with them, just transferred them. So so as as an overview, it seems like really it's the thing that you're getting is exactly the same, but in the open book DEX case, you have anonymity between the maker and the taker, and that in my opinion is something good, because for example, if you wanted to do this with ERC 20s in Ethereum, you can't do that, because you would need to have an address owning tokens, send that in a public way, unless you're adding, unless you're doing some extra layering on top.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes total sense, I have to say.
I guess I'm kind of waiting to see if people who are doing these things in Ethereum will eventually get to that point, because yeah, I guess I definitely like Ethereum, and I enjoy the amount of experimentation that's happening there. But this is something that is quite tough, because they're doing this account-based addressable. So you're using an address for a long period of time. So not only are you showing all the token transferring that's happening, at the DEX level, but also address per address. Maybe how long people are using that, or you could do, similar things like with Bitcoin, where you're doing transaction analysis and seeing which addresses are participating together over time. Yeah, so I think being able to hide your address would be useful when it's just general members of the public using this. You don't have to think about whether you're leaking all that.
There's my current roommate is sneezing behind me.
Great.
I'll mute myself.
We can't all mute ourselves. What's next?
Yeah, what's next?
Stablecoins.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out what's going on here. So what they give is, so instead of this mint or conserve, we have a mint or enforce, in which so they have some centralized authority that can enforce policies that do something with these coins. But so though the centralized authority can create these policies and can enforce them, it doesn't know who actually has the coins or other things about them.
Mm-hmm. Well, but it was saying something about having a whitelist or a blacklist somehow, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or simply a blacklist. But yeah, I'd imagine you could do the opposite too. I guess this is for all the STO type things where you need to have some kind of approval.
The thing that I'm curious about here with the stablecoin is whether or not these are, like, what kind of stablecoin they have in mind here. Because there's the stablecoins that are based on crypto. There's stablecoins that are based on, like, what is it, collateral.
So yeah,
like there are the algorithmic stablecoins, which I think are still pretty unproven, and then there's those that are based on collateral. Some are based on like fiat collateral, and some are based on crypto collateral.
I think it's borderline impossible, from what I can tell, to make an algorithmic stablecoin in a zero-knowledge private world, because the whole idea is you kind of collateralizing it against an asset of value, and that if you're because of price fluctuations, you become under-collateralized, so the collateral becomes less than what you raised, then you need to be able to forcibly sell that off. And if you don't know how much collateral you have or what it's worth, or how to sell it because you don't have the secret keys to it, then that just seems a little bit unworkable.
I'm not sure that's the case. In particular, looking at this, I can't see why we can't do a DAI type CDR.
CDP, you mean?
CDP, yeah. As long as we have this central authority, which in this case would be just giving the exchange rate. So if we somehow have some trusted source for the exchange rate that sort of maybe gets published on chain somewhere in the plane, that these things could somehow read, then we could do a CDP.
The thing about the CDP is, even if you have the exchange rate, so if you create a CDP, you could publish like the collateralization ratio of your CDP and have that be public without leaking much information.
No, you wouldn't need to publish that at all. Your CDP would. So we have these lock tokens.
Yeah.
So we have this record, which stores, which has our locked collateral and stores how many tokens, how many of the stablecoin, has our locked ETH type thing, and records the amount of DAI that we took out. And if the exchange rate is too low compared to these, then we just then we can't get our ETH back, or
so that's not quite. I believe
it comes unspent.
The way CDPs actually work is they like automatically.
But But I don't
or
think
like
you need that.
uncollateralized once you hit a certain threshold.
No, but you can force the
We can
user
do
to
that.
that. You can force the user to do that because you can put the minimum threshold achieved during a certain period of time into the Merkle tree, and then they won't be able to refer to anything in the past except to that is too low or whatever, except to do this like
right.
this
But how
forced
does Maker work when we have this thing? So what we can't do here is let someone else do something with your F.
No, you can't do that, but you can force. They can force you to do it.
You can force it to be locked.
Yeah.
The locking is not quite enough though, because the way it stabilizes the price of DAI is that if it becomes under collateralized, your collateral is then what currently happens is a smart contract will sell off your collateral to buy DAI out of the ecosystem, and you can't really do that in a private world because your record, your locked ether, obviously that's like an algorithm doesn't have access to the secret required to spend that.
So if they have enough stake in the thing, probably it just becomes expensive. They probably just need to have more stake in the thing so that they're going to choose to sell off instead of lose much more money by not selling off. Because
you're relying on people who are under collateral. Actually, well, the thing is, if you become under collateralized, then you actually don't have an incentive to sell off because your DAI is worth more than your collateral.
No, but what will happen is
that depends
the
on
DAI's
the
value will disappear.
That depends on the rate where you lock it. Okay, I have the DAI's value.
No. I mean, in this zero knowledge thing,
yeah,
I'm saying if you stake much more than the actual value of the DAI, or the zero ZK DAI thing.
Yeah.
And then if they can't actually, if you don't do the like sell off thing when you would have to, then you can't get any of it back.
Well,
you can't get your collateral back, but you can't control what happens to the DAI, because then, I mean, the DAI obviously you can then send a transfer. That record's then destroyed and the new one's created. So you can't have a history of what's CDP.
The point is here, we don't confiscate. We don't make your collateral. You make your collateral unrecoverable. We don't lock it. We don't take away your money when we're sort of 50% out on the exchange rate. You require a much bigger collateralization to sort of force people. So the right thing to do is to redeem yourself. Or increase your own collateral, rather than end up in a situation where your thing is unspendable.
Well, right now they actually do 1.5. That's like the amount that you collateralize for the amount.
So you could probably also do something custodial here, which maybe the field don't want to do, but I'm sure you could do something like that.
That gets rid of the zero knowledge.
I kind of wonder here if this is more like, I mean, it seems a bit like a thought exercise. I don't know if it's as thought out. I also noticed in their presentations on this paper, they tend to focus on the DEXEs. I actually have never seen them go in depth on the stablecoin. So I wonder if it's more just like the initial thoughts about it.
So the main thing I'm actually interested in this for is just the fact that they have the pairing curve, the curve on top of a curve thing, this construction that they already have in the paper, because this lets you do we want it for it would let us do certain kinds of availability stuff that we want and have the chain be zero knowledge. So like you can aggregate and verify a bunch of snarks in another snark, and that other snark is actually some proof of validity for a huge chunk of stuff going on. So this is so the primary interest to me, at least, is that there's actually an implementation, even if it's just academic quality, of a curve on top of a curve that's somewhat efficient.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many of the presentations on ZEXE, but I guess still what I like is this idea that you have these predicates, and that if you mint or conserve, well, conserve could also be extended then into this idea of enforcement. So if we're somehow wanting to do bonding curves or other other such constructions, then yeah, somehow if that could be entwined with an enforcement policy for another record, and which maybe it could be, because as I was understanding from the previous parts of this paper, you can have transactions that are of a certain size, but they're kind of leapfrogging each other. So you're able to use the result of one transaction to continue going into another. And then so if you were to have somehow, this, locked amount of another record, and somehow you could make that available to this stablecoin, or the other name that they gave it is what, the centrally managed asset. I think maybe at least for me, when I'm reading that as the second name, for me it's just, stablecoin means that someone's actually responsible, as opposed to there are tokens and they're just given out to the users of of this blockchain. Instead, there is an entity that is somehow responsible, so they need to have an enforcement policy in place. But maybe it could also lead to things like, like this make or die setup. But again, at least for me, what's really cool is that these predicates give the opportunity, along with this record structure, to maybe touch multiple things at once. Whether or not that's disclosable, I'm not sure. That would be really fun to play with, though, to see if you could have enforcement touching multiple records, not just the one stablecoin.
Yeah, I wonder if, like, a lot of these applications, a lot of the language and concepts, they're using existing DeFi things at the moment. But I wonder if, like, when you talk about token exchange and you talk, like, what I'm constantly wondering about this is, like, could you then use it more for, like, transaction token exchange, like, where it's not actually tokens, it's not actually about exchanging value even, but you're basically using some of these structures for, like, more of the infrastructural stuff, where you actually want just some sort of, like, movement to be private, or that's just sort of what I started to envision with it. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely off base, but that was this idea that, like, I've noticed this a lot in general. When these concepts come up, people will start to apply a lot of different techniques to them. But in fact, like, what they're actually doing is, like, a future version, whatever the DEXes evolve into, and maybe they're no longer just, like, exchanges per se, but they're more like almost like interoperability plays, which, I mean, they kind of could be or are. But then there's other things you could do with interoperability. And I'm wondering if this would somehow play into it. But I don't know. I haven't thought that far.
Yeah, I mean, I get that vibe. I get that vibe. Maybe not directly from ZEXE, but this idea that, yeah, you can have interchain atomic swaps. I mean, that's definitely an active area of research. Maybe because a lot of people have been mining Bitcoin for a while, and they're going, oh wait, yeah, pseudo anonymity, right, or various other reasons. But I don't know. I mean, you'll probably hear me say this a lot. Privacy by default is a really good idea, which is one of the reasons I really enjoyed this paper, because it's kind of making that the main point. Like, all of these ideas here are, how can we make it so that transactions can happen, on a public piece of infrastructure, with privacy preserving as one of the first rules. And I think that's a worthy thing to keep pushing for.
Cool. Does anyone else have any concluding thoughts? Because I think we're at time, actually. Did you guys like the paper?
Yeah, well, I find it surprising that the title is actually Enabling Decentralized Private Computation, and the only applications they came up with is simple token exchange. I find this a little small, I have to say, compared to what's possible with this scaling technology. So for the application part, I'm pretty disappointed. What do the others think about this?
Well, it's an interesting model, right? The question is that I'm sure that it allows some very interesting applications that people haven't thought of yet, because it's difficult to get your head around.
And that's, again, that sort of speaks to what I said there, where it's like, I think they're using examples that people will understand, because the other examples don't really exist yet.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also a function of the fact that what you can do in ZEXE is still like the amount of computation you can perform is relatively limited because of proof construction times. So like keeping the examples to quite simple, understandable things, maybe it kind of helps set expectations that you can't validate the output of a machine learning algorithm in ZEXE, not just yet, at least.
You know, I'm thinking, so Pratouche, I think I'm saying that, hopefully I'm saying that correctly. He's in our group, and he was a co-author on this. And I was thinking it would be fun, like in general, I was hoping to interview him for the podcast and see if I could like dig into this kind of stuff and see with him, like, I'd like to ask him that question of like, is this, you say computation, exactly what you just said, Wolf, like you said computation and your example really wasn't. And is that because you're just trying to describe, I mean, maybe it's like outside of the scope even of this project to try to describe that application. And this is just like, yeah, here's the limitation, here's the system, here's the limitations, here's an example that we can say now. Maybe there's some others in the future.
Yeah, I think Pratouche is on the ZCon 1, and we will grab and torture him.
Definitely.
Eat him beer until he talks.
Cool. All right, I'm going to shut down our recording here. You guys are welcome to stay on longer afterwards if you want, but I think just for our audience, thank you guys for paying attention. This was the third part of our ZEXE study club sessions, and I'm definitely curious to learn more about this and to do more of them. So yeah, I'm going to stop now.